Welcome to Don't Get Rusty, where we have fun chatting about the things that will help keep you proficient. Today, our webinar is about handling cockpit distractions. We're joined by YouTube phenomenon, Eric Haase. It's Hayes, isn't it, Eric? Yes, I'm sorry,
It's
Eric
Hayes, yeah.
Hayes, who we found on YouTube, and we just had to bring him to you. And so we're going to have an actual video that he took showing what happens when he had a cockpit distraction. Now, we're going to jump right into introductions, but if you will give me 30 seconds, we've cut it down from 60 seconds to 30 seconds. We'll go over a few things about the webinar. Yeah. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. And so if you want to watch it, it will be on the AOPA Live YouTube channel in about 24 hours. Also, this webinar is eligible for Wings credit. You have to do nothing. Assuming that you signed up with your Wings email, it's automatic and it should show up in about a week in your Wings FAA account. Okay, and so if you are using a computer, you should see something like this. If you would like to interact with our panelists, meaning if you would like to ask us questions, we love questions. You can just click on that little bubble right there and question away. And we might take some questions in the first part of the webinar, but usually the last 15 to 20 minutes or so will be exclusively answering your questions. Okay, so as I said, I am Keith West. I am a flight instructor, and my position at AOPA is to help flight schools deliver a better flight training experience. Today, we are missing our colleague Pablo. He is on vacation, but we do have Chris. Chris, introduce yourself.
Glad to be here. Chris Moser. I'm also a CFI and work on the same team as Keith, and I work with CFIs in schools to build educational resources, and so excited to be here. And we are really excited to have Eric Haase with us from SoCalFlyingMonkey, also expert cinematographer. And so let's go ahead and let Eric introduce himself.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Eric Haase. I'm a freelance cinematographer and instrument-rated private pilot living in Southern California, and started a little YouTube channel to share my passion for aviation with other people.
I've seen you've gotten a lot of views on that YouTube channel. I mean, what's your biggest video? How many views you get?
I did a video about the renovation of our Cherokee 6, and it's got over 500,000 views. And it's been really fun to hear from a lot of other people who have, share interest in that particular airplane, or just, renovating an airplane or putting in glass panel and everything. It's been super fun.
Oh, that's the video I saw, and it's a great video. And we'll mention this a couple times throughout the presentation here, but how can people find your YouTube channel?
So you can go on youtube.com/SoCalFlyingMonkey, all one word, and you'll get right to the channel.
Yeah, and
I imagine you could just search for that too and probably find it pretty easily. That's what I did as well. So easy to find. Just remember SoCal.
SoCalFlyingMonkey. Yeah, SoCal.
Yeah.
I think on YouTube, if you start typing SoCal Flying, it'll probably autofill it.
Exactly what it did.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, since we are talking about cockpit distractions today, one of the first things that we're going to do is roll a poll. Now, Stephen, say hi. Stephen is our producer. He's in the background handling questions and all the wonderful things that have to happen to make the webinar work.
Well, hello everyone. Good to be here.
All right, let's take a look at that poll. And so we don't actually
exciting.
Yeah, there it is. Okay, have you ever had a door pop? I guess that's one of the most, Chris, have you had your door pop open?
I have. I've had it happen, and I'll maybe tell that story later. But yes, I've had some excitement in the cockpit.
Yeah, me too. Exactly. All right. Okay. Let's see. So how's the poll going there? What is our turnout so far?
About 21% so far.
Look at that. We got a lot of
Pretty
people
even.
who never have the door pop open. All right, let's go ahead and let's take a look at those results, Stephen. Let's show everybody what we're looking at here.
That's a pretty even.
Yeah, it is. But other big distractions. Wonder what a big distraction might be. Maybe we'll get into that. If you have a story or a comment about what your distraction is, send it in, and we'll comment on that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get rid of that, and I am going to quit sharing this. So Eric, are you ready to roll with your video? Do you want to jump right in that, or do you have a little bit of intro before we roll your first video?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd love to just say that this is a part of a video that's part of a larger video about our trip to Sedona last Thanksgiving. And this is kind of like, I guess, the highlight of the video, or the most dramatic part of the video, but it's kind of the end of the video. So just to give you a little context, because there's some stuff at the beginning where we talk about like the end of the trip or whatever, it might be a little confusing, but that's what it is. Otherwise, I think, yeah, I think we can just roll it.
Okay, and remember,
cool.
guys, that we are going to, it'll mute us automatically when I roll this. And this video, people, just so you know, what is it? About 3 minutes, Eric? Three?
Yeah, it's about 3 minutes. In the beginning of it, you'll see what the little title intro for the channel, just to give you a context of like my family and what the channel's about, and then there'll be the video.
Okay, all right, we're rolling it now.
Let's check it out.
Here we go.
I'm Eric, a private pilot based in Los Angeles. Join me and my family on our aviation adventures throughout Southern California and beyond. Like any vacation, this one felt like it ended too soon. It was time to clear the snow off the plane and get going home. But there was one more bit of excitement in store for us.
Taxiway Alpha, taxiing runway 21, head of the Skylane, Sedona traffic. Doors are closed and latched, you guys?
Yes, I watched theirs outside.
Yours still is in the open position here.
Okay, mine not latched.
Sedona traffic, Cherokee 631 Bravo Whiskey is taking runway 21 for left crosswind departure Sedona.
After taking off, we wanted to do a little sightseeing.
Engine gauges are in the green, fuel flow is good.
Terrain ahead, terrain ahead.
Don't worry about that.
It's not shut.
The door?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go land and we'll shut it.
No, it's okay.
No, you're not gonna want it. It's gonna get cold with that.
It's okay, we're not very far out. Let's just land real quick.
I don't want to. Do you?
Yeah, I think we should.
Oh, just give me this big coat.
Okay.
As soon as the coat got sucked out the door, the plane started to vibrate and buffet. At first, I thought there might be something wrong with the engine, but the jacket flapping in the slipstream caused the stabilator to vibrate and the plane to shake. Poppins was doing everything she could to hold on to that jacket, and I was doing what I could to focus on flying the airplane, despite its strange aerodynamic state. The jacket was really hurting her hand, and I encouraged her to let go of it, but I'm really glad she held on to it because it could have gotten caught up in the stabilator. Well, that was exciting and not the kind of excitement that I like. It was kind of sloppy coming in, but I just tried to stay calm and be on speed and watch my speed on the base of final turn, and landed even though it was handling a little bit weird. So I inspected the plane and I think everything's okay, so we're gonna take off again. It was a little scary, but it's gonna be all right. All right.
All right, so you guys, you might be muted, so check that out. And so a number of things strike me about the video, and so we're gonna talk a little bit about the techniques of the video, what happened as far as in the cockpit things as build, and I think people will have questions about your aircraft as well, and so we'll hit on these, and if you have questions in the audience, just send those as they come along. But Eric, the first thing that struck me when I first saw your videos is I was like, oh my gosh, the quality on these is just incredible. How does that happen? So maybe you should explain a little bit about why your videos look so good, what your background is, and how you were able to do that.
Oh yeah, so I am I'm a professional cinematographer and I shoot commercials, films and television based out of Los Angeles. So it sort of is, like it's my profession, it's what I do. And when I decided to start making flying videos, I kind of set out to make them as high quality as possible because I wouldn't be happy with myself if I didn't exercise all the skills that I've learned over the past 20 something years doing what I do. So yeah, I mean, I use the same, like GoPros and things like that that other people use. I just do a lot of post-production work on coloring them and exposing them properly and everything. So that's one of the reasons that they look the way they do. And I take some extra time with editing and music editing and trying to tell compelling stories as well. One of my goals with the channel is to connect with other aviators through these stories. I don't really want to just show flights, I'm going here, going there, or whatever. It's more, I just want to find the meat of the stories and tell the stories.
Yeah, and there's a lot of good drama in this one. The one that you did with when you're restoring your aircraft, I thought was really funny. And so, it is great to have that storyline aspect of it, and not just, it's kind of what we're doing with this. We want to have a webinar that we have fun doing it. It's just not presenting the information. Okay, and so then we'll get back to the technical parts of that, and if anybody has any questions, jump in, because you answered a big question. Is like I was pretty sure that you were using the same cameras as everyone else, and so what takes it to that next level, and maybe later on in the webinar we'll get deeper into that. But we're here to talk about we're here to talk about flying. So why don't you tell us about that experience and how it affected you, and what your thoughts are on it.
Yeah, that I guess just in the moment of that, I didn't really know what was happening when the plane started shaking. The coke got sucked out the window, the plane started shaking, and I thought there might be something wrong with the engine. And it wasn't until later when I reviewed the footage that I could see that the stabilator was shaking due to the disrupted airflow from the jacket. So I really just tried to stay on speed and not go too fast either, because I thought whatever is happening with the airframe, maybe it's going to be more damaging to it or worse if I'm going fast. So I tried to stay slow, but still above my minimum maneuvering speed that I set for myself. And I just tried to, control the airplane and do too much to diagnose the problem, except to know that like it's probably the jacket and my engine instruments are fine. So fly the airplane and land it and stay calm. And that was what was going through my head.
Yeah. So is there anything that you would do different, having experienced it?
Sure. I mean, I've learned a lot from this. One of the things, I guess, starting on the ground is just training the passengers in the proper use of the door. I've talked to a lot of other pilots, and they suggest, hey, only the pilot should ever operate the door, and I think that's totally valid. For me personally, I want my passengers to understand how to use the door and operate the front and the rear doors in case of an emergency. I'm incapacitated or they need to do it for some reason. I want them to understand safely how to do it. So maybe incorporating a more thorough explanation or demonstration of the door, even though I do that, somehow to incorporate that into the passenger briefing. And incorporating into the passenger briefing the scenario where, hey, if the door opens, don't panic. If the door cracks open, don't panic. The airplane's going to fly fine with the door slightly open. Don't try to put anything over it. We'll just come back and land, and that's what we're going to do. That's what the plan is. There's no discussion about it. I used the checklist in this. Even though I used the checklist, the door, and visually looked at the door was still slightly open. It just wasn't latched on one of the strike plates. I think on the Cherokee there's two. There's one on the side and one on the bottom, so it just wasn't fully closed. Even though the latch was latched, the door hadn't engaged the strike plate.
That's one of the things that I was watching on the video there, I'm sorry to interrupt, is that I noticed, because I've seen this video a couple of times now, and just this time I noticed that you had mentioned to your wife, like, hey, that's not on the checklist, that's not locked, and you were looking at the upper one, but it looks like it was the lower one, right, that became unlocked. So did you visually verify that one too, or could you not see it, or like what happened? Did she maybe miss that? Any idea what happened there?
I think we were probably taxiing with the door open for the breeze, maybe. And then I think she just didn't slam it closed enough. And I did see that the latch was unlatched, and then she latched it, but it wasn't closed. It might have been the side one, because the other latch, the handle doesn't change position if the door is latched properly or not. It's just the little pull, the door pull. So yeah, I don't know. I think one of the latches, probably the side latch, wasn't fully, like, it was latched, but the mechanism didn't fully engage the strike plate, and that's where the gap was. And the gap was so small. I couldn't even imagine that like a big puffy jacket would get out this tiny little crack. But I guess the force from the the pressure is so great that it just pulled it out there. I mentioned this to people. It's like, if you've ever seen a video of like an octopus getting through like a little tiny hole, squirming through, that's kind of what the jacket was like. I wouldn't even think that could happen, but it did.
And I know we have a question online here too, and it said and there's a bunch coming in, and we'll look at some of these in a little bit. But it says, explain what it is about airflow that keeps the door ajar in flight, and why it's impossible to close it once that happens. Obviously, as you saw, I've had that happen to me as well. And so it's like, I'll throw that out to you guys. I have my own theory of potentially what I think is going on, but Keith or Eric at all, any ideas of what you think is happening, why it's so difficult when that happens to get it closed?
Well, I think in a Skyhawk, I think you can close it, but that's different. That's one big flat panel on the side of the fuselage, right? Whereas the Piper, it wraps over the top of the fuselage, the door, a little bit, and I would imagine that has something to do with it not being able to close. Would it have been possible to close that door, Eric? What do you think?
So I've had this happen where the door is slightly open, and I've tried to close it. I didn't try in this instance, but I've tried to close it before, and I've never been able to successfully close it. But I've heard from other pilots that if you slow down enough, put some flaps in, slow down enough, or bank a certain way, then you can pull the door closed. And that sounds totally reasonable, like it's possible, but I didn't want to complicate the situation any further by slowing down anymore and risk stalling, especially I knew I was coming back to land and we were right there at the airport. I might try that if, we're an hour and a half into the flight or something and there's nowhere to land or whatever. Or maybe I'll try that. I'm at altitude, have time to recover, but I was pretty low. I didn't want to risk that, but I think that's possible. I've heard from numerous people that you can do that.
So Chris, I'm venturing into uncharted territory here live, so pull me back if I'm going too far afield. You're more technical than I am, but wouldn't the air pressure on the outside of the plane be lower than what's on the inside, and that would have something to do with it?
That would definitely be my suspicion, is because you got that, obviously the faster airflow inside, right, or sorry, outside, and so that you think potentially maybe a Bernoulli situation, so that faster airflow. And then I definitely know, because I had a situation that happened to me in a Piper Chieftain, and the hatch came open, and I thought the same thing. I'll just be able to, do whatever to get it, and it pulls hard, and so it's got to be that airflow getting sucked out of the airplane, sort of think of it like the Venturi, as that airflow is flowing by very quickly outside, sucking that air from the inside, which shows that power, like how that jacket got pulled out, because it didn't look like it was that wide, and you clearly see that jacket in the video get sucked right through that hole. And that was my experience too, and I had it. It was really difficult to get it closed. So
I think that's pretty clear. Science.
Yeah, exactly. Science. Hey, one thing I've seen a couple of comments about, people were asking about, and I know that when we were doing our prep for this, Eric, you mentioned this topic as well, but people were asking about, it seemed like there was some debate going on with the family about whether you should turn back or not. So do you want to maybe explain a little bit about that, what happened?
Absolutely, yeah. I think one of the things I learned from this, and that my family learned too, we kind of post-game or, like debrief this together. The PIC authority, PIC responsibility is paramount. And in my mind, when this happened, I had made up my mind that we were going back to land, but they were sort of debating it, and I didn't exert the authority outwardly and say, hey, this is what we're doing, end of discussion. I just sort of said, no, I think we should do it, even though I'm like, I'm going back already. I'm already planning to go back because I know that's what we have to do. So I think it's a really good thing to drive home to your passengers, even if they're experienced traveling with you, and even if they're super familiar in their family. I think that family dynamic can change things a little bit, where everybody thinks, oh, I've got an opinion here. So this is really important to recognize, and something that I learned, that we all learned. We've sat down and said, like, hey, let's watch this together. Like, look at this discussion. You know, this happened, and I should be making this call. I'm the pilot in command. I've got the experience. Like, this is what I say needs to happen. It needs to happen. So yeah, that's definitely one big takeaway. And you know, looking back on it, I've been criticized for it, like, you know, in comments, and I'm totally okay with that, because yeah, I should have said, no, this is what we're doing outwardly, even though inside I was like, yeah, this is what we're going to do.
Yeah, it's I mean, being a pilot, it's one of the few places left in society where you can be a Captain Bligh with some sort of justification, right? Well, my story about that, I grew up in Charlotte, and when I was thinking about going to the Naval Academy, I flew my father and brother up to Annapolis for like an orientation visit type of thing. And so I was coming back, and it was really bumpy. And there was this layer, kind of, it wasn't a layer, but maybe scattered puffy white clouds, you know, a couple thousand feet above us. And so I said, you know, I think we'll climb up over top of those clouds, and I don't think it'll be so bumpy. And my dad, and remember, I'm 17 years old, and my dad said, no, I don't want to do that. And so I waited another minute or two bumping along, and I just jammed the throttle up and climbed up, you know, and sure enough, it was smooth up there. But, you know, the takeaway being that, you know, whoever's in charge of the airplane is in charge of the airplane. Just like you talked about family dynamics, you know, sometimes you have to assert yourself, and, you know, that's your job.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I think one other thing that goes along with that is that as a pilot in command, oftentimes, like, we have to make an unpopular decision for the benefit of our passengers, even if they don't really know that it's for their benefit or don't fully understand it in that moment. I've had a time where I was going to Mammoth here in California on a ski trip with some buddies, and the weather at Mammoth Airport was deteriorating. It was forecast to be much better. It was deteriorating. And I just made the call, like, hey, we just can't get in there safely. So we'll divert to Bishop and rent a car. And it means losing a few hours of skiing and a little bit of extra expense. But, you know, that's a tough call to make when you have a plane full of excited passengers and you feel like you're going to disappoint them, but it's the right call. And that day ended up being fine. Everybody was like, oh, no problem. It's great. And we had such a great time anyway. It didn't even really matter that we'd had to do that. So yeah, it's sometimes it's hard to make those decisions, but it's the right thing to do.
And that kind of points to something that I've learned over my time as well. It seems like most of the time the pressure being put on is us. It's us as the pilot wanting to complete the mission, and a lot of times the passengers don't mind. There have been tons of comments coming in here, and I just wanted to throw a couple out there. A couple of people are saying that there is a checklist in the Piper POH for this, I guess in the Cherokee checklist that says what to do when the door comes open. They're talking about side slipping it to put the relative wind on it. But one of the interesting things along those themes that comes up that I thought would be interesting here is they talked about maybe the idea of briefing the passengers to say, like, don't do anything. If something happens weird, don't do anything unless I ask you to, or get the POH out, or do something along those lines in the passenger briefing, because in the situation of putting that jacket in the door just took the situation and then made it even potentially more complicated. So I just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on that. Like, how do we brief the passengers, especially when we're dealing with our family?
Well, you know, I think there's a balancing act, right? I mean, you want to tell them everything that they need to know to be safe, but on the other hand, you don't want to instill all this fear about all the bad things that might possibly go wrong, you know, and just so I was, you know, tell them how to operate the equipment and that sort of things, and I do tell people, like, things like, when I'm on final, I don't want to hear anybody talking. You know, and you know, a few things like that. And most people, once it's been explained to them, they're okay with that. What do you think, Eric?
Yeah, I think it's hard to cover, you know, every situation, but I think that's a good point. Is like, hey, just don't touch anything. If you think you need to do something, ask me what you should do, you know. And yeah, I think it was her idea. Like, I said, oh, you're going to be cold, and she said, I'll just put this jacket up here, and I didn't really think it could turn into a problem. So I didn't see anything wrong with it. I think if I had said, don't do that, she wouldn't have done it. Yeah. But it probably would have been better if I had briefed her and she said, like, hey, can I do this? Maybe I would have thought about it more. I'm not sure.
Yeah, next, of course, stuff happens, right? Unfortunately, that's how we learn sometimes, and unfortunately from this one, we can learn from it. Just for the folks out there too, I see lots of questions coming in about the technical questions with the cameras. I think we'll hold off on that part, but we'll definitely be able to get to that because I'm sure Eric will be glad to answer about all the different mountings and all the stuff that they're asking about. So we'll just get that in there. One thing I know that happened to me that's just interesting with that door situation is I was a freight pilot after I did some full-time instructing, and I flew a Piper Chieftain. And the weird thing was, in the freight airplanes I was flying, they put a bulkhead behind us because obviously we would fill the back up with cargo, and we had a hatch that they literally sawed into the side of the airplane, and we would get in and out that way. And so if you can imagine a Chieftain, it had this hatch that would flip up almost like a DeLorean or something like that. And they in our training, they said, you got to make sure both latches are down. So it reminds me, I've flown in Seminoles and Archers and that kind of stuff. So it reminded me a little bit of that, but this was something that they customized for our airplanes. We'll call it customized. And I one time I was climbing out of Phoenix Sky Harbor where I used to fly, and as I was climbing out, the thing popped and it kind of cracked open, just like what happened with you on that. And I was like, what do I do? And I thought it was my fault. So here I am putting the blame on myself, thinking I must not have checked that latch properly. So I'm trying to pull the thing closed and get it latched, and I couldn't. It was like half latched. And then what happened to me was, as I was doing that, I thought I had this great idea. I thought, well, maybe like in a car, if I just get the thing open a little bit more, I can pull it and slam it shut. So I undid the other latch. Bad idea. And the thing popped out, and it was like, and they had told us, don't let it come off because the thing could rip off and go back and hit the tail. So here I am climbing out on an instrument flight plan, holding on to the hatch with my hand, trying to fly the airplane. And it was like, and I'm struggling to hold it. And I'm just thinking, do I have to go land? Do I need to go land at Deer Valley was right there? I'm like, but I don't want to land because I don't want to cancel my IFR. And I felt embarrassed and all this other stuff because it was like my fault. So I was able to get it slowed down. ATC's calling me and they're like saying, hey, could you start your climb now? They're giving me that clearance, and I'm trying to slow the airplane down, and eventually I got it closed. I learned a whole lot from that of what not to do, which was I should have told ATC what was going on. I should have potentially just gone and landed. I mean, who cares? So it's just some decision making on my part of that. So when it comes to that, we see some comments coming in too about that crew resource management. Did you call Pan? What are some of the thoughts you had with that, Eric, in the sense of what kind of things were you learning after this that would potentially change the way you do things in the future?
Yeah, so when it happened, I thought, should I declare an emergency somehow? Sedona's uncontrolled, and I was just on the CTAP there. And there was one other guy who announced himself who was a little bit farther out. And so it wasn't very crowded at the airport or anything. So I knew that, and I think I said on the radio, unfortunately, the wire that was connected to my phone to record the ATC audio got knocked out when she grabbed the jacket, which is why there's no in-cockpit audio in that second part of the video. But I think I said like, hey, I'm just gonna, sneak in here in front of you or something really informal because I wanted to get in there. And it wasn't like I cut him off or anything, but I think if there had been any kind of more of a conflict or more people in the pattern, I would have just said, hey, I've got an emergency. I need priority. I'm going in, try to deal with it or whatever. But I didn't like do pan or declare any kind of emergency. I wasn't on with ATC, so it was just common advisory.
Well, I mean, me just watching the video, I think you did a great job of handling. I mean, you didn't seem ruffled by it. It's like, okay, we've got this problem. I'm going to go back and land. And I could see that even though your family was like they wanting to open it up for discussion, you're already in the turn. It looked like you had made your decision about what you were going to do. Is that right?
Yeah, that is right. Yeah, I had decided as soon as it happened, because I've had it happen before. And I know that it's loud, and it's a 3-hour flight, a 2.5, 3-hour flight, and it's loud and it's going to be cold. And they already get cold in the plane. And this was like November. You could see snow on the ground there. They had just had a snowstorm come through Sedona. So I knew it would be loud and cold. They wouldn't like it. Even if you plug it with it, it's still going to be cold. It's still going to be loud. So I had already made my mind up about that. I mean, I've flown with the door in that not latched properly before, and it's fine. Like, it's not dangerous in and of itself. It's just annoying and can be distracting. So but yeah, I had decided to go back.
That's a point worth I'll
Good.
I'll go and then you can go, Chris. That's a point worth making too, that most general aviation airplanes can fly without the door on completely. I mean, and like a lot of people don't even know with Skyhawks, you can fly with the windows open, and so it may not be what you're used to, all the noise and wind and everything like that, but the airplane's probably going to fly just fine. And so concentrate on flying the airplane just like you did, I think is, and just be ready for things that happen like that. I think just, everyone on this webinar just have been exposed to this. And if something like that should happen, you're like, okay, this happened, it's not a total surprise. I can handle this. And, I think that's a step forward. You had something, Chris.
Yeah, well, number one, I agree with Keith's comment too, Eric, that you obviously did the right thing. You got it down safely. Everything worked out. So it worked out. Two thoughts came to me. One was a question I saw in here, and then one of my own was when that was going on, because again, I'm just, now that I've seen the video a couple of times, I'm starting to think more about it. And when that was happening and you're deciding to turn back, were you still hearing all the discussion going on? Or were you kind of just focused on flying? Did you kind of filter a lot of that out? Do you remember what was going on then?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because there's been some other situations, and I've gone back and watched some videos of some takeoffs and landings that I thought were, challenging for me. And I listened back, I'm like, wow, they were saying these things during that, and I can tune them out like so easily. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I can tune them out. My audio panel does have an ISO button as well, so I know that that's there. If it, on an instrument approach or whatever, things get crazy, I can push that ISO button. I didn't in this case. And back to the whole PIC authority, we have talked about, when I say hey, let's, sterile cockpit, be quiet, then that needs to happen, and they understand that. I didn't do that in this case because everybody got quiet when the jacket got sucked out and started to shake. But initially when the door was open and that during that discussion, yeah, I was definitely not really hearing too much of it. I was just like, okay, we've got terrain over here. We've got terrain over here. The Avidyne's already barking about the terrain. Which way am I going to turn back to the airport? Thinking about the pattern entry and everything. Yeah, my mind was there. It wasn't on that discussion.
So a couple of questions that I'll just pull up from the part here is, one was, did you notice any difference when the door popped open and the jacket hanging out? I guess really when the door popped open, did this airplane seem to climb a little more slowly? Was there a climb degradation in performance?
We weren't really climbing at that point, so I didn't notice anything with the climb, but I did notice this shaking and buffeting. It's hard to describe, and the cameras are. I think that on that video, the camera that I was using to shoot us was a 360 camera, the Insta360 1X, and it is so stabilized, so you don't really get a sense of how much the thing was shaking, but it was just sort of buffeting and shaking, almost right before a stall, but it was flying fast and level, so I knew it wasn't going to stall, but just felt like the engine was running rough or something. So yeah, that was the main thing that I noticed, and it wasn't as responsive in terms of the handling of it. I was just like, this thing is handling really weird. So it made me really focus on the airspeed and try to hit that and concentrate on it.
Well, what I would I'm a fundamentalist in a lot of ways. I mean, you come back to a few things that really matter, and it's aviate, navigate, communicate. And from what you're saying, that's exactly what you did. You were paying attention to the airspeed, you were looking out where you were, and you didn't, honestly, I mean, like you said, if there was somebody that you needed to get out of the way by declaring an emergency or pan or something like that, right? But that is the last priority, is the communication part. So
yeah, and I wasn't really even I kind of looked around, and then I looked and I saw what was going on with the jacket, and I was like, that's likely the whole source of the problem here, and I'm not even going to worry about what's going on with them. She's holding the jacket. I'm just gonna do this right here. I'm just gonna fly this plane and land and do that like I always do, the best I can under these circumstances, and hit that airspeed. And then I did try to, she was like, my hand is hurting so much. It's just she was in a lot of pain holding that jacket. I was like, oh, just let it go. Just let it go. There's no, we're over this. There's nobody down there. It's, it's a light jacket. It's not going to hurt anybody. And she didn't want to. She was just like, I thought I was going to kill somebody either way, So I'm glad that she didn't, because looking back, and this is something I just didn't think of at the time, was that it really could have gotten caught up in the stabilator and caused a much bigger problem. So
Right.
I'm really glad that she held on to it. And I wasn't like, you have to let it go now. It's like, look, if it's hurting your hand, let it go. Like, no big deal. So, but she made that choice, and I'm glad that she didn't listen to me in that moment. I wasn't like assertive with that, because I wasn't even thinking like what could happen with it. I didn't consider that consequence.
Yeah. Just a good comment here I want to read is from Scott, and it said, I almost lost a Belanca Viking on takeoff roll when I tried to slam the door shut, accidentally stepped on the rudder, and almost went off the side. And so, it's not only like the distraction, it's how you respond to it. Is it going to make the situation worse? So like in that situation, just if it's not something that's an immediate danger, just let it go. Focus on flying the airplane, and I think you're better off. You were going to say something, Chris?
Yeah, there was one thing was comment, and there's a couple about the PIC authority and stuff in here, but one was that we had a couple of questions about the terrain warning you were getting from your Avidyne. And so for the folks that maybe don't know, Sedona's on a mesa, and it's surrounded, especially up to the north end of it, by sort of a canyon. So were you taking off to the north that day, or were you taking off to the south?
Yeah, I was southwest, runway 21. That I took off. Then we turned left crosswind, so I guess we were going just more south at that time, and we were just going to kind of do a loop around, the Bell Rock and the other the rocks over there to have a look. And as you're going south, there's kind of a ridge of terrain that you're coming towards, and I don't think we were below that. I don't know. I'd have to look at the flight instruments to see. You could probably see them in the video to see our altitude and stuff.
Yeah,
Okay.
but even so, it's like, I know because I used to fly, one of my runs would go up through there, and you got some space. It's like that terrain's there, but you got space. You were in the daytime, so I doubt that you were in any kind of box canyon or anything. Yeah.
No. It is not tight over there. It's pretty reasonable, especially departing that direction. Departing the other way on runway 3 is like you're really going into the terrain there, and that you've got to watch. But going off at 2-1 and turning to the south, it's not too bad.
Okay, I think what we will do now, we have another shortened version of the video, and we're going to show that. And he also has comments on it, and so it will highlight some of the things that we've been talking about that. So we'll take a look at that video, and then we're going to open it up to questions, because we have loads and loads of questions, and we will get to some of the technical parts too. So let's roll the second video. Remember, we're going to go mute, guys.
This one's cut down to about 2 minutes.
Okay.
Doors are closed and latched, you guys?
Yes, I watched theirs outside.
Yours still is in the open position here.
Okay, mine not latched.
Sedona traffic, Cherokee 631 Bravo Whiskey is taking runway 21 for left crosswind departure Sedona.
After taking off, we wanted to do a little sightseeing.
Engine gauges are in the green, fuel flow is good.
Terrain ahead. Terrain ahead.
Don't worry about that.
It's not shut.
The door?
Yeah.
Okay. We will we'll go land and we'll shut it.
No, it's okay.
No, you're not gonna want it. It's gonna get cold with that.
It's okay, we're not very far out. Let's just land real quick.
I don't want to. Do you?
Yeah, I think we should.
Oh, just give me this big coat.
Okay.
As soon as the coat got sucked out the door, the plane started to vibrate and buffet. At first, I thought there might be something wrong with the engine, but the jacket flapping in the slipstream caused the stabilator to vibrate and the plane to shake. Poppins was doing everything she could to hold on to that jacket, and I was doing what I could to focus on flying the airplane, despite its strange aerodynamic state. The jacket was really hurting her hand, and I encouraged her to let go of it, but I'm really glad she held on to it because it could have gotten caught up in the stabilator.
All righty, that was great, Eric. Yeah, and it's really cool how you see something the second time you will notice more things. And like we were saying, we have a bunch of questions and a lot of comments, and people kind of verified what we were thinking, Chris. It's about the differential in air pressure, about why you're often not able to shut that door. For one thing,
Yes.
if you have to, sometimes you have to kind of get a running start on closing the door by pushing it out and then pulling it in. Well, you can't push it out because of the air pressure, and because there's more air pressure on the inside of the airplane. A lot of planes, you're just not able to close that door. So, okay. Go ahead, Chris.
I was gonna say, Eric, did you have some? I know you had some sort of like thoughts that you put together. There's like I noticed you had them on the video. Did you want to mention those before we start taking the questions, or?
No, I mean, I think like the graphics on the video kind of drive home things that I've taken away from the video, and I thought it'd be cool to share that. We talk about it, and then you can see those things. It's kind of a nice. I think it pretty much explains itself in that way. And I agree, though. Like watching it again, every time I watch it, I feel like I observe another like little detail. I'm like, oh yeah, look at that dynamic, or oh, what was I thinking there? So it's great. It's great to go back and learn from that stuff. I think, like, I do want to say, like, having cameras, a lot of people are putting cameras in the cockpit. And this is something that I thought about when I first started shooting my own YouTube videos was, how are these cameras going to, in and of themselves, be a distraction for me? Am I going to be worried about the batteries running out? Am I worried if they're rolling, if the power cuts out or whatever? And it's something really to think about if you're going to do that. And it's something I think about and take responsibility for. Am I going to be making decisions that I wouldn't normally be making because these cameras are rolling? So those are just good questions to ask, I think. And I feel like I ought to say that. Like, here's somebody who's putting video of the flights on YouTube, and I think it's a great learning tool to record your flights and play them back and learn from them like we're doing now. But I think also it's important to think about this stuff, on sort of a bigger level.
Excellent. So I am going to read a comment here, Eric, and I will preload this. His name is Roy, and it's ex-U.S. Air Force and airline pilot with 23,000 plus hours, okay? And he says, Eric, you did very well. You maintained aircraft control, evaluated the state of the aircraft, concentrated on flying the airplane, and you focused on landing as soon as possible. It's always better to minimize extended flying in an experimental configuration. So there you go. Sounds like an expert.
Yeah, nice.
All right, so let's jump to other topics. Now, my question for you is, tell me about how you chose a Cherokee 6 as your family aircraft, because it seemed to fit your family. They seem really comfortable there. And how did you go about that process, and how's that worked out for you?
Oh yeah, man, the 6 is so great. We pull the middle row of seats, and they just like kick out their legs, and it's so comfortable for them back there. Yeah, so we had a Cherokee 180. And that was the first plane that I got, like right when I was finishing up my private pilot, 4-seater, 180 horsepower. And we really enjoyed flying that around Southern California area, 2 or 3 hour trips. And, we just started to want to take more stuff and go farther and faster, and in more comfort also. So I started the search for the next plane, and being familiar with the Pipers, I'm thinking, well, the maintenance is probably going to be similar. I know all the systems of this. I assist with the annual, the 180. I'm comfortable with this, and the 6 really fit our mission. It's economical to own in that, like, it's a fixed gear. It's a simple airplane. The flaps are manual. They're not electric. Like, it's about as simple of an airplane as you can get, aside from the propeller, constant speed propeller. But yeah, and 6 cylinders on the engine, of course, instead of 4. But yeah, so we got that 6, and have really been enjoying it. It's the Suburban of the skies, it's just so, and you can't really like overstate the cabin width being such a big part of the comfort. The legroom is part of it, but also in the 6, like, you've got this space between you and the co-pilot that somebody can actually like move through it if they needed to. Like my daughter can get up and like hop back to the back. They've never done it, but they can. But there's that elbow room, and you just feel just so nice and comfortable for long trips. It's great.
Well, it's great that you can get your family involved, because I mean it's a drag on a number of people's flying career when they can't get the people they're closest to fly with them. So do you think your daughters will? What do you have? 2 daughters? Is that right? Or
2 daughters. My 12-year-old is definitely interested. She's kind of math and science oriented, and she says she wants to, you know, like be an engineer for NASA, which is awesome. And I'm encouraging her to fly. We watch a little bit. We watch like some YouTube flying stuff. We watch a lot of like science shows on YouTube, and she's real interested in that stuff. So I think we're gonna get her. I try to have her do some of the tune the radios and explain some things. I don't want to like overdo it. She's 12, so we're slowly getting into it, but I think she'll end up doing it.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Chris, do you have any questions lined up for us?
My goodness. I'd say one of the common themes that we probably should just go ahead and hit, because we've been putting them off this whole time. We've got folks asking about the software that you use, the cameras that you use, and how you do that. And I think I've covered the wide gamut, because multiple people have been asking that. So maybe if you could give us a rundown of the stuff that you use, the equipment on the airplane. And then one was even tips for how a renter could put cameras on an airplane too when they don't own it like you do. So would you kind of run through that technical part for us, Eric?
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm happy to share what I know. I have been also, just to mention, I have been putting some behind the scenes kind of stuff that I do, a little bit of how-tos on my Patreon site, which is patreon.com/SoCalFlyingMonkey. And so that, like in one of my videos, my 12-year-old, it looks like she's flying the airplane by herself. And you see like all the seats, and she's just kind of flying the airplane. And I show how I did that. That was like a visual effects shot where I shot her, and then I shot a plate of the empty seats, and then I do a match move on it, and I like paste the seat on there. It's kind of like a more advanced kind of stuff. So like I have a little like, hey, this is how I did that shot. And I'm going to be doing more content like that just for people who are interested in it. I'm not going to put it on YouTube necessarily, because it's so like niche, it's so specific, and I just don't think it's like fits in the overall channel. So it's like a separate thing, but I will mention that if people are interested, that I am bringing that content, because I do get a lot of questions. But yeah, as far as the camera, so I was going with this 360 camera in the front, which was great. You can make it shoots 360 degrees, and then you can like render out 2 different angles from it in the software. So that was kind of an economical way to get 2 different shots out of one camera. And that camera is the Insta360 1X, and now they have the 1R, which is a great camera, and it has a twin lens that you put on it. It's modular, it has a twin lens, so you can do this 360 stuff, or you can put a regular lens on it, and then it's like a GoPro. So I think that camera's about $500, and so it's like kind of having like 2 cameras in one, which is awesome. So now I've switched to the GoPro in the front, and I use the 360 camera sometimes on the tail tie down or underneath the wing to kind of do special shots. As far as the mounts go, I use like a suction cup mount just on the windscreen in the front. And then on the side, I've been using that to shoot kind of like ends up being right next to my head. It's another GoPro on the side, and shoots you can see the panel and then the windscreen. And then I have like a GoPro usually behind me that's on the one of those like GoPro stickies there. And I recommend, you know, GoPro 7 or 8, because the stabilization is finally good. There's a lot of vibration, and the GoPro 7 or 8 have good enough stabilization that it takes it out. The 360 cameras are incredible for stabilization. That takes all that stuff out as well. So if you're using an older GoPro, like I tried using my 3 or 4 that I had, it was the 3 Plus, and it was just like the shutter, it was like Jello cam, it was terrible. So yeah, 7 or 8. What else? Are there any other specific questions? Oh, as far as like a renter goes, somebody? I mean, the suction cup mounts.
And then the software that you use too for editing, they were asking about.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, for a renter, suction cup mounts are a way to go. You want to try to get something that has like a short arm. So if the little arm off the suction cup, usually it's like suction cup and then an arm, and then like a little ball, you can kind of like loosen it up and rotate the camera around. That's important. But you want that arm to be short, so the vibrations don't like pass through it. As far as software goes, so for work, I actually do some color grading for work professionally, and I use an application called DaVinci Resolve, and it's free, but it's the software that professional colorists use for commercials and feature films. And so I know that software really well, and my focus is really on the image and the color. So I actually use that software. It has a nonlinear editor built into it that they've really been expanding, and it has visual effects program built into it. And so I use that, and it's great. A lot of people use Adobe Premiere, which I recommend also. It's great, but that I feel like for somebody casually doing YouTube stuff, to be paying a monthly thing for software like that can kind of be a bummer. So DaVinci Resolve is free. There's a little bit of a learning curve with it, but these nonlinear editor applications are essentially all the same in terms of what they do. The finer points of them are a little bit different, and the keystrokes or like how it represents it. But it's once you use one and understand it, to transition to another usually only takes like about a day or two, where you jump in and like read the manual and look through it. So yeah, DaVinci Resolve, the free version, can do pretty much anything you want to do.
That is awesome. Professional use software that's free. I mean, I was expecting something crazy expensive, but yeah, that's great.
It was a real game changer when they came out with it for free a couple years ago. It really opened up, like high-end professional color options for people at home. And that company sells camera hardware and a bunch of other video hardware. That's how they support that. But I mean, this is like your favorite Hollywood movies were colored on DaVinci Resolve, probably.
There you go. So have you used the Garmin Verb? Do you have any experience with that?
I haven't used the Garmin Verb. Haven't tested it or anything. I can't really comment about the image quality. I know another popular camera is the DJI Osmo action camera, and I think that's a really good camera as well. DJI is an awesome company. They're really like innovating. I have a Mavic Air 2 drone that I just got recently, and I can't believe it. It's amazing. For like $700, this thing flies around, takes amazing images. But their camera technology for DJI is getting better and better. I think like their image quality is great. It's not, I think the GoPro image quality has a little bit of an edge, but DJI Osmo Action is a little more affordable, and for most purposes, it's great. I like to try to squeeze out like as much dynamic range as I can, because there's such a huge exposure split between the inside of the airplane and the outside windows. That's what I'm always battling. So I need as much dynamic range as I can get.
Cool. So there's one more question always. Do we get FAA Wings credit? Yes, and you don't have to do anything. One other question, Eric, is how you're capturing the sound.
Okay, so for the sound, I do it two ways. I used to take this cable called the iRig 2 that you can get on Amazon, and I plug that into the headphone. I want like a spare headphone out, like or I'd use just like a standard headphone jack splitter, like the big headphone. So split it, and then take that output and use this cable to go into my phone and just record on the Voice Memos app. And then I'll just clap, do a clap marker for when the camera's rolling and the sound is rolling, and then in post-production I just like line up the video track and the audio track and synchronize it. And now I have the PMA 450B audio panel, which will stream Bluetooth out, and you can record on like supported action cameras. I think maybe the Garmin will do that, but I just go to an iPad mini via Bluetooth, and so I just turn that on and use an app and record. I put it away, and it's just going the whole time. It's really nice.
That's awesome. Wow. Yeah, I didn't know they would do that. Cool.
Yeah. So I have a review video that I did on the PS Engineering PMA 450B, and it goes over that stuff. And there's this audio panel is amazing. I don't like have any like, I just like it. I don't have any like deal with PS Engineering or anything, but it is like you can listen to music. Everybody has their own music and intercom and all this stuff, and it makes the whole traveling experience for the family really great in the 6. And the Bluetooth has 2 Bluetooth. You can do Bluetooth in and Bluetooth out, but that's one of the ways that I record the audio. It's great.
Excellent. All right, Chris, what else we have?
So I definitely want to hit on, there's a little bit about the decision-making model, and some people are asking, had mentioned earlier, but there's one more of this. This is an interesting one to cap off the technical stuff, which is, you already kind of answered a lot about this. You mainly use suction mounts, it sounds like, on the exterior. And then the person was asking, are there any aircraft-specific mounts? Sorry, I think you said suction mounts out in the wings too, didn't you?
No, I would definitely not ever use a suction mount on the wing. Please don't use a suction mount on the wing.
Okay.
All
right. There you go. And then the other part they were asking was, are there any FAA regulations when you're doing this? I can't say that I'm necessarily aware because I don't do this, but are you aware of anything FAA-wise, or have a feeling, I think that it's just more, I don't know that there's a
Yeah.
specific reg against this, but.
So there's a video, I think this company called FlightFlix, they make some mounts, like some good steady mounts for it. And they have, I think there's a video on YouTube about what's considered a major alteration and a minor alteration. And then within minor alteration, there's like a major change and a minor change or something. And it shows you the whole decision tree of mounts and what you have to consider in using the mounts, how big the camera is and the mounts, if it changes appreciably, the the aerodynamic characteristic, or there's some terminology there, but I think the short answer is like these GoPros are kind of pilot discretion. And if you're doing something bigger, or consult with your A&P. I think that's kind of the takeaway that I got, but I would encourage people to do their own research into it and take their own, risk and liability with it and responsibility for their own actions. Like, I'm not telling you what you can or can't do. And the video is pretty helpful for me to understand the whole decision tree. But I think if you search up like FlightFlix, FAA camera regulations on YouTube, it'll probably come up.
Very cool. And then
I do want to say, like, for the wing, for the camera on the wing, there's they sell a mount, and then there's N-Flight Cam has a mount that just like goes where a screw for my fuel tank would go, and then there's like a little ball head, and I put the camera out there. And then there's like a wing tie down or tail tie down mount that I think it's called my ProPilot makes or something, and I use those, and those are both really secure.
Yeah, I've got one of those in flight cam. Go ahead, Chris.
If someone can answer here too, it says a short version. If it requires tools to install the camera, then it's a 337, which is a alteration. If tools are not needed, it's not even a minor alteration. So that's potentially helpful from Lawrence saying that there. Thank you.
Okay. So Chris, you said something about, we're not going to get way into the decision model, are we?
No.
I know you like decision models. I see one comment.
It's more of
here.
a wrap up, because going back through, because there were a lot of questions coming in very quickly, and I was trying to pay attention to what we were doing and also reading all the good comments. So the common theme that I was seeing was that we had questions about, well, we talked about the door opening. Are there any other ones? There was a question on that. There was one about, in the Piper, it says, like, I know in Cessna, it'll say when you're coming in for an emergency landing, put a door in the dart, to keep it ajar. And I guess the Piper says the same thing, but clearly in a Piper, if you open that door and stick a jacket there, it's just going to fly out. So is that such a great idea? And then the other question was, we talked a lot about the door being open. Obviously, that's because that's what happened. Are there other distractions as well? And of course, I would say there are plenty of other distractions. I've had engine fire lights come on. I've had electrical failures, any kind of enunciators, all kinds of stuff can happen. Radios not working. And so that's why I wanted to get back to, maybe we can talk a little bit about our takeaway for how you already kind of mentioned it, Keith, too, that aviate, navigate, communicate. So just thoughts on what do we do when these distractions happen and how do we handle them, I think is the general theme of what I was seeing.
I've had other distractions. I mean, like a GoPro suction mount, when you get to a certain altitude, can fall off, and then you've got a camera that falls down in front of you or in your lap or whatever. I've had the baggage door, the Piper, pop open when I'm on the takeoff roll, and also when I'm in flight because it wasn't properly closed and locked. For me, just from the experience, yeah, aviate, navigate, communicate, but also just like whatever it is happening with that distraction, unless it's real safety of flight issue, like you just make sure you're flying the airplane, you got your flow scan done with everything, like go over your checklist again, what your normal flow scan is for that phase of flight, get that done, then work on addressing the problem, and don't just like react to it right away and go, oh, what is this, what is that, what's happening. Like, just make sure these ducks are in a row first. That's for me what I think about.
Keith, do you want to mention what you would do potentially in that situation, or any thoughts?
I was actually just thinking about other distractions, and to me, a single pilot IFR without an autopilot that's a distraction from the get-go. I mean, you're trying to read a chart and approach plate and keep the airplane upright at the same time. I mean, honestly, I won't even fly that way anymore unless I have somebody with me. But distractions is anything that keeps you from keeping the airplane upright and going where it needs to go. And so, even operations.
That could even be when things are operational and you're messing around with a glass panel, right? Or a GPS that you're not familiar with. My gosh, there's just tons of distractions. So it comes down to that, fly the airplane first and really pay attention. I guess one of the things I think about, obviously the aviate, navigate, communicate. When you're flying VFR, you should have your eyes outside that airplane probably 90% of the time. And so if you find yourself looking in a whole lot, then in fact, I prefer to hand fly it because it's like, unless there's really something I got to focus on with the autopilot, because it forces me to keep looking outside. Because it's like, it's almost a thing where, and the other thing I do as a little trick is I'll have the airplane trimmed up, and I'll teach my students this as well, is that if you have to look at something inside, force yourself to take your hand off the yoke. I will often do that because it forces me to want to keep looking back outside. I almost give myself a little rule of, if I'm not looking outside, then I can't hold the yoke, for instance, and that forces me to kind of just do a quick glance inside and back outside for where I should be paying attention and flying. So just try tricks like that. Go ahead, Keith. I know you're going to wrap us up here on our official.
Oh yeah. Well, first of all, Eric, thanks so much for coming in. I mean, we have had an absolute flood of questions. So you've really struck a chord out there with your videos, and I encourage everyone to go to YouTube and search for SoCalFlyingMonkey and to look at some of Eric's other videos, because they're great. And I think most of us will especially like the one about you renovating your Cherokee 6. But thanks so much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And if anybody wants to like continue the conversation or has technical questions or whatever, wants to connect, I'm at SoCalFlyingMonkey on Instagram. So you can just hit me up at SoCalFlyingMonkey on Instagram and message me, and we'll talk from there. It's been so fun. I gotta tell you, like, just creating these videos and making content that I want to produce and watch, and connecting with other people who are passionate about this has been super fun. I really appreciate the opportunity.
And we really have been enjoying these webinars. This is the 11th one we've done, and the idea was that we engage with pilots who aren't flying because of the shutdown, the COVID, etc. And we've been doing them once a week, and that's a pretty punishing type of schedule. And so, going forward, as we do get back more to our normal routines, we are going to transition to a once a month schedule. And so we're going to be the second Thursday of every month. And our next webinar is on July 9th at 12 Eastern, just like they have always been, Thursday at 12 Eastern. And it's getting comfortable with airspace, where our very own Chris Mosier will be talking to us about the joys of airspace. We're going to do our best to make it fun and exciting and entertaining, right, Chris?
I think so. We're gonna blow you away with it, I hope.
All right. Well, thanks everyone so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you not next week, but the week after, July 9th. Later.
Cool. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.